Good morning, everybody. It's Tom Christie. Welcome back to the Decoy Carving Shop, and this will be session 2 of carving a hen shoveler decoy. In session 1, we got the bird band sawed out, we got the head coped out, and now it's ready to carve. And in this session, we'll focus on rough carving the head. I don't know how far we'll get in this session. I want to keep these reasonable in length and kind of break it up in pieces that make sense as you're carving your own decoy. If you're enjoying my channel and getting some value out of it, please consider hitting the subscribe button. That does help me out, along with any thumbs up. Just a show of support for the channel. It's totally free. We'll keep it that way. The purpose of this channel is to hopefully inspire people and create interest in carving wildfowl, whether it be decoys for hunting purposes or just carving wildfowl for the love of wildfowl. And I get a lot of joy out of it, hoping by sharing this, you'll get some joy out of it as well. So let's get started. Let's start by taking a look at the study bill, and this happens to be a Drake study bill, so the bill is longer than the hens, but we can kind of use proportions. I don't have a study bill for the hen. Normally I just get one of each species, and you can kind of interpret dimensionally to help carve the opposite sex. So we'll take some dimension, just some characteristics of the bill. If you don't have a shoveler study bill, very narrow up here, small V-notch here. The nostrils are pretty close to the face here, and pretty traditional structure, but pretty narrow between from the top down. Nice wide spoon bill out here, small nail, and very characteristic side profile, and we're going to want to duplicate that in our carving. This is almost upturned here and then drops down to this lobe area, and then the lamé you can see exposed here, so we're going to want to carve in that characteristic on this lower mandible as well. Quite a shelf here between the upper and lower mandible, so quite a bit of shadow cast there. What else? I think that's just pretty narrow overall from the top and widens out. So let's take a look at the hen carving. Let's just do a quick comparison between the Drake and the hen. You can see hopefully the size difference there in the bills, but I can use the Drake study bill to help me locate where should the notch position be from the tip of the bill to the tip of the notch here on the hen, since I don't have a hen study bill. I'm getting a length from the tip of the bill to the cheek here, and I want to compare that distance to the tip of the notch here, and it happens to be on this particular bird the same dimension on the Drake from the side to the tip of the notch to the tip. So I can use that reference point on the hen, go down to the length of the hen's bill here with my dividers, and use then that same dimension to locate the tip of the notch on the hen's bill, which is, I've already put a mark there, right there. So that gives us a good reference point using the other study bill as a guide to the structure of the hen's bill. Let's take a look at the width at the top. It's about a ½ inch between tip to tip, and I'm going to go a little less on the hen and do 3/8. And it's relatively short back to there, so the notch is not very long. That gives us a starting point And now the crown, I know from my reference, is 1.5 inches wide. So I'm going to pencil that in using my center line. And that's going to fade right into that notch, back to the eyes, and then narrow up back here. So we've got a guideline on carving the head. All right, let's get carving. I'm going to start with this 1/8 inch diameter ruby bit and go in and define the V notch here. So I'm going to leave the center raised, and I'm going to lower each side just a bit. It doesn't come down much on the shoveler from the side profile, so just take out a little bit of material on each side here and take it back to kind of a guideline of how far back the tip of that notch comes. And then I'm just smoothing out a few things while I'm there with the side of that bit. And I'll round that notch raised area just a bit here. Now I'm going to shift to this 3/4 inch kind of round-nosed cylinder. This is a saber tooth, fine tooth burr. And I'm going to narrow the crown. And I'm narrowing that down to the guideline I have on top. And while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and begin rounding the upper mandible. You can see this head is not very large. I don't have a lot to hang on to here, but there's enough to do this safely. And I'm just going at it very slowly and not trying to rush anything. And you can see I'm just removing material down to the eye and hitting my width guideline on the top of the head here. We've talked about different grain patterns in Tupelo before, and sometimes they're a little bit unpredictable, so you just want to go very slow with a burr like this, because every once in a while you'll start grinding against the end grain, and that can make the burr jump, and you just need to be very careful. You can see I'm beginning to form the cheek of the bird there, and now I'm going to very carefully begin taking material out here. Remember, we penciled in the neck guideline on the bottom here. So I'm going to take this down to that guideline and kind of round in so that the cheek casts a little bit of a shadow down where the neck is. I'm rounding that back area, forming the back side of the cheek there. And then I'm rounding this back to the center line in back. So I've got a little more to take off here. So going at it slowly, and we're trying to develop that nice hourglass shape from the front of the bird. I can get a little bit of this material out of the neck under the chin here in front, but I'll have to go to a little smaller burr later, or a smaller bit, to finish that work. Right now I'm just kind of rough shaping things. Okay, I've kind of hit the guideline. Now I need to round this cheek area. And again, just keeping my fingers away, as far away from the burr as possible, in case I slip. I'm going to take a little material out on the cheek here and round that down into the neck area. So we have a nice soft transition between the cheek and the neck. And round this area in back where the cheek bulges out a little bit. Just continuing to work that neck area. And now I can use this burr to just very lightly take off the bandsaw marks on the side of the bill. And that's when, or the coping saw marks. When we cut the bill out, remember I cut just on the outside of the line, and that gives us a little leeway to take material off here so we don't have any rough edges. Now I'm rounding that, just kind of taking it in, and I'll do the other side in the same fashion and then come back. All right, now I'm going to shift to kind of a conical shaped ruby bit here. It's kind of a pyramid shape, and I can use that to get into this lower neck area and transition area where I couldn't use the heavier burr for this work. And I can finish rounding the neck in that area on both sides. So this will show you I'm using it to kind of dig in and create a little bit of a shadow under the cheek there, and then removing material so that the neck is nice and round in this area, and then rounding under the cheek here. And again, I'm using the side of the burr or side of the ruby bit to clean up any burr marks that I left with that heavier bit. I'll speed up the video here a little bit. Okay, we're at 2x speed just to get through some of this grinding a little quicker, but this way you can see more of the grinding that I'm doing. I'm just using the side of this ruby bit to kind of finish the shaping and do some pre-sanding and take out any hard edges, smooth everything out. All right, now we can work on defining the bill here as it meets the face. And I want to pencil in a little guideline for myself here on the shape. You can see that shape where it hooks back here. And then it's relatively a straight drop down from that point. So I really like to pay attention to the shapes of these. They're all unique in some respects between species. So now I'm using that 1/8 inch cylindrical ruby again, and using the edge of that to define that shape on each side. And we don't have to cut out much material here on the shoveler. It's pretty subtle, but you can see that's defining between the line between the bill and the face of the bird. So I'm cutting a little trench and then using the side of that bit to remove material and smooth things out. So that's starting to take shape now without a lot of work there. I'm going to pencil that back in to make it easier to look at and more visible. Because really at this point I'm looking for good symmetry from side to side, looking from the front. And I can see just by penciling that in, I need to take this back a little further on this side. And now is the time to make those corrections rather than later. That little flash you saw was my signal for my wife that she's leaving. So she flashes the shop lights for me. All right, now let's pencil in some more detail here. I'm going to use my dividers and get a measurement from the tip of the bill back to this rictus area where the upper and lower mandible meet. So I'll give myself a point of reference there on both sides. And to make sure that's positioned correctly vertically, I'm going to get a measurement here from in this area to measure the distance of the upper mandible from that point above and give myself a reference mark there as well. And that really kind of nails the location of where the upper and lower mandible meet and how far back I need to carve into the face. So I'll pencil that in using those two reference points. And I want to remove material in this area so that we can form that little smile in the corner of the where the upper and lower mandible meet. And I'm going to go back to my 1/8 inch ruby bit here and use the side of that primarily to remove material. And I'm taking it down to the width of the bill here as it continues back into the face. I want to maintain that width. So I need to take material out in this area and bring that down to the same width as the bill in front of it here. And then I'm kind of redefining that vertical. Getting this cleaned up with the side of the bit. Same thing on this side. I'll just repeat it so you can see it. I'm just using the side of the bit, going down, taking that down until I match the width of the bill as it comes into the face here. And then cleaning up the vertical and kind of further defining that. Just doing a quick reference check to make sure what I penciled in and what I carved match. All right, now I want to change bits to this little conical shape bit and use that to round. We don't want a hard shelf there, so now that I have that positioned properly, we can round the edges back into the face with the side of this bit. And I'm just using the tip of that bit to kind of clean things up here. A little better view on this side. I'm just taking that down, removing the hard corners here and establish some nice round curves back into the face. And then I'm using the side of that bit just to kind of clean things up. I'm going to pencil in where we stand. And I want to go back to this measurement from the tip of the bill to that corner where the upper and lower mandible meet, and make sure that I've taken out enough material to allow me to hit that point on both sides. And it looks like I'm in good shape there, so I'm just going to give myself a reference mark. Now let's look at the shape of the upper mandible here. Now we can lay out the lower edge of this
upper mandible, and there's a little bend down and then a slight upward, and I got a measurement there so that I get the full width that I need here, and then it ties back into this lower lobe in that location. It gives us that real characteristic smiley look of the, as some people call it, the Hollywood duck. Like that. Now, very carefully, got a sharp knife, little downward there, and I'm going to score this multiple times so that I'm not pressing too hard and slip. And I'm going to make it progressively deeper. Then we're going to go in with a cut from the side here, carefully. I'm going to make that fairly deep, maybe 1/8 of an inch, and then score along the bottom. Same thing here, multiple times. So we're very careful with the knife. Got quite a ways to get through this lower mandible, so like that. Cast a nice shadow there. I'll get the other side done, and then we'll do some grinding to clean things up here. Now I need to do some work on the lower mandible here. You can see there's a little bit of a return back into the face down here, and a little bit of chin showing under the lower mandible there. So we need to do a little work to carve that in here and tie that into kind of the V shape underneath the chin.
All right, back to my cone or triangular shaped ruby bit, and I can use the point here and then the side of that bit to take that lower mandible back a little farther into the face and angle it like we saw in the pattern. And then I'm removing material above that so we don't have a hard shelf there. It's a little hard to see, but I'm just creating that, taking that mandible back a little further into the face. Now I'm going to pencil in the lower mandible as it meets the face here, and there's a little bit of material we need to take out to create that chin in the V area underneath. So very carefully again, I'm going to take my knife in this direction, take just a little sliver out of here, and do that on both sides, and you can see that that shape is now more accurate down there. Same thing over here. All right, I've got that shaped up, cleaned it up a little bit with sandpaper. Now I want to work on the eye width, and I've got a reference dimension from Pat Godden's pattern book on the distance between the eyes. I use Pat's books for these type of reference dimensions. I think it's one of the best resources going if you can find a copy of it. I'm going with this cone-shaped ruby again, and I'm just going to cut a groove through the eye and form the channel here and take that out to the bill. So we develop a line of sight down the length of the bill here in front of the eye. So it doesn't go up, it doesn't go down, it kind of follows the line of sight along the bill. I'm going to further define the cheek back here a little bit and round. After I cut the channel in, I'm rounding the cheek down and the head up to the crown from that eye channel. This distance between the eyes is really critical, and I see a lot of newer carvers probably don't pay enough attention to that, and it can make your duck look bug-eyed, or their eyes are set too narrow. I'm still a little far apart here. I checked that dimension, so I need to go deeper. And it's this type of attention to detail that'll really make your carving look more realistic when it's all said and done. I'll speed this up a little bit. Okay, now we're at 2 times speed, and I'm just gonna keep working on this, and now we're at the proper dimension. So I'm happy with that, and now I'm just going to do a little bit more definition of the cheek here, round some things out, and just make sure I don't have, that we have a nice soft transition. Just a quick look from the front. You see that hourglass shape? It's starting to shape up, and now we can work on the crown. Now I'm going to go back to my 3/4 inch diameter saber-tooth burr and round the crown. Now that I have the eye set at the proper dimension, the depth of the eye, then I'm going to go ahead and round, and the head of the Hen shoveler from the front is fairly round, so we want to take off enough material here that the head doesn't look too blocky or square from the front profile. So I'm kind of rounding to the center line and leaving the center line intact so that I don't lose the character of the pattern. And then we can narrow this up in the back of the head here as we get over the crown and to the kind of the back of the neck going down to the body. And I'll just give this some time and effort to make sure I have symmetry from side to side so the head doesn't look lopsided from a front view. And then we'll follow up with some sanding after this grinding is done. Okay, just a quick front view again to show you where we stand. Now I'm going to shift to the 1/2 inch sanding drum with 150 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to use this to rough sand the entire head at this point and just get rid of a lot of the burr marks. Make sure there are no edges that throw shadows that I don't want. I want the whole head to look soft at this point, so I'll take some time and sand the entire head with the drum, and then I'll also do some hand sanding that just kind of finishes the job I'll speed this up a little bit and just show you a little bit more of this sanding, because I'm doing some final shaping along with just making things smooth here. And I can use the edge of the sanding drum to really get into some of these tight spots and just finish the definition of the carving in those areas. It's also good for this eye channel area to really smooth things out. All right, now I want to create a little cheek detail here in the front and also in this area back here. Gives the head a little more character and personality, and we don't want to go overboard. I don't want trenches that look like grooves have been cut in the head. We want this to be nice and soft, but I'm going to start with this cone-shaped ruby bit and just cut a little bit of a trench here in both of these areas. And then I'll use the side of this bit to round the cheeks back out, forward, and then flip it around and round backwards as well. I mentioned we want this to be subtle if you choose to do it. Because the shadows that are thrown can really help put life into the head as it projects, but harsh shadows can really make the head look unnatural and awkward. So it's a careful balance here. So I'll spend some time smoothing those out. I just wanted to show you that process. And I'll give you a little better view here. Hopefully you can see a little bit of a shadow there. And I'll go back to my sanding drum and kind of finish the job here. Again, I can use the tip of the sanding drum to really get down in that crease area and soften things up, and then round everything out and soften everything in all directions here. Just a light touch at this point. And I'll have to finish up with some hand sanding as usual. But I wanted to do this one side so you could take a look at the process, and then I'll duplicate that on the opposite side as well. You can see I'm using the corner of the drum there to really smooth things out and sharpen things up. That's starting to look good. I'll do some hand sanding and finish up with that, and that'll really soften everything up. And I won't make you watch me sand. It's just a necessity. So I want to include it in the video. So I'll go over the entire head and finish up that process. That gives you enough for the head shaping, and then we'll come back. All right, now I want to take a look at this area under the bill. It's kind of scooped out under there, and I'm not, on this particular decoy, going to put a bunch of detail on the lower mandible, but I do want to cut some material out under here. I'm using the nose of that 3/4 inch round nose saber-tooth burr and just taking some material out here in the middle. So from the front, it'll project as a little cupped shape as opposed to just a hard lobe down there. You can see a little bit of shadow there. That's about all I want to do to shape up the lower mandible, and I'll go back to my sanding drum and just finish the job here with a little bit of a concaved area under there. I just think it adds accurate character to the shoveler bill. And again, I'm choosing not to carve a bunch of detail into the lower mandible on this bird. It's more of a smoothie, a decorative smoothie when we're done. There, that looks pretty good, and you can see that little cup shape under there from the front.
Here's just a quick look at the roughed out head. Give you a front view as well. This could be a preening bird. I think I'll like this alert position. Okay, that's a good place to stop session 2. We've got the head roughed out, and in the next session, we'll add details to this very unique bill. Hopefully get the eyes installed and start shaping up the body. Until then, Tom Christie signing out. Have a great day.